Hello from the Edinburgh Fringe, and hello to the newscasters who come to see us in the Edinburgh Fringe. Hello. So just a reminder that this week's newscast is going to sound a little bit different because, we are in a sort of theatrical venue. We are at the Edinburgh Fringe. I've got one of these handheld microphones that sounds a bit kind of echoey. We've got a very enthusiastic audience with us. I've just realized who else is going to be on this stage at various points during the Fringe for the next month. Any Smack the Pony fans here? Yes, a few. That's a very famous 90s and noughties sketch show. They're doing a reunion show here in a few weeks' time where they're going to be interviewed by Kirsty Wark. So that's quite good. Yes, Kirsty Wark's more famous than Smack the Pony. Let's not tell them. I'll leave them a little note backstage. Who else is here? Kieran Hodgson from Two Doors Down. He's doing a show. Does everyone love Two Doors Down? It's interesting. A lot of my English friends have never heard of it. And if you're listening to this and thinking, what is he talking about? Two Doors Down is a Scottish sitcom about like some people living in a cul-de-sac. Apparently it's in Lenzie. Does anyone know where Lenzie is? Yeah. I love it. It's very, very funny. And actually, you don't have to be Scottish to get the jokes. So Kieran's going to be here. And then, best of all, who remembers Michelle McManus from Pop Idol? Early days of Pop Idol. That was just when I started my career as a journalist, actually, on Newsround. Michelle McManus was a big story for us. She's going to be here in a few weeks doing a show on this very stage. So I'm delighted to be sharing a stage, not necessarily right now, but through the next... I've really mucked that up, haven't I? Because I'm not sharing the stage. It's like sort of time travel, multiverse thing, isn't it? Anyway, right. Shall we get on with this episode of Newscast, which all week is going to be introduced by some friends of the pod. It's the King's Singers a cappella singing group who have recomposed our trademark theme tune. Take it away, guys.
Newscast from the BBC.
He has just compared me to the Fat Controller.
Did I say that? I can't believe I said that. Next question.
This is all for the benefit of Earth.
I'm not personally a huge Sabrina Carpenter fan. I don't think I'm being rude.
I like landscapes.
Take me down to Downing Street. Let's go have a tour.
Blimey.
Live from the Edinburgh Fringe.
Hello. It's Adam at the Newscast live show at the Edinburgh Fringe, alongside some very enthusiastic newscasters who've joined us at the Fringe too. So the newscasters who are in the show, well, on the way in, were given little cards with a QR code on it so they could submit their questions, and we'll hopefully be reading out some of their questions later on. We don't quite have the budget to do roving microphones, so you won't hear from them, but I will do my best to pose their questions. And actually, we've got one already from Anonymous. I actually just gave him a little pep talk saying, please don't make the questions anonymous because it makes you sound weird. And Anonymous says, did Chris pick the entry soundtrack? Because as the audience were coming in, we were playing the best of Shania Twain. Yes. So Chris didn't deliberately pick that, but we picked it on his behalf. Right. The good news is this is not going to be a one-man show where I just sit here for an hour and talk about my life story. That would sell maybe 1 or 2 tickets, not the hundreds that we've got today. So luckily, I've got some friends of the podcast who are going to help us be entertained and informed. So please, first of all, welcome all the way from Washington, D.C., but also via Scotland, it's Sarah Smith. Hello, Sarah! Showbiz air kissing. Welcome.
Thank you.
And shall we bring on another Scot? James Cook, Scotland editor. Hello, James. Come on. Welcome. James, I'll just blow you an air kiss then. Yeah, there we go. I've only been here one day and I'm so lovely already. It's amazing, isn't it?
Been in London a long time.
Right, this is a bit of a reunion for you two because you were on Newscast last week having spent hours and hours and hours on that golf course watching Donald Trump. So
Yes.
Welcome back.
Thank you. We used to spend a lot of time together at BBC Scotland in Glasgow too.
We did. A long time ago. It feels like a lifetime ago. Lifetime of news.
And Sarah, were you a regular Edinburgh Festival goer in
Absolutely
other years?
love it. I grew up in Edinburgh, went to school in Edinburgh. Even in my school uniform, I used to go running off as soon as the school gates opened to see a show.
Oh,
I'm
cool.
booked for various things this week. No, and every summer I can, when I've not been living in Edinburgh, I've made a point of taking a week off work and coming through to cram in as many Fringe shows as possible.
And for people who've never been to Edinburgh in this period, paint a picture of what it feels like being in the city at this point.
It's really exciting. I don't think there's a better place to be for these 3 weeks in August anywhere in the world, because you've got what's always a beautiful city, full of excitement and vibrancy. And even if you don't go and see a single show, the streets are full of life and colour and excitement. And there's everything you could possibly want on offer. Some of it's rubbish. And you will waste money and go and see a show that you don't enjoy. That's all part of the fun. You'll also see surprising, amazing things you never thought you would witness in your life. And you can do it from 10 a.m. until midnight every day if you want to.
And James, you're living in Glasgow, so you don't have to comment on this, unless you'd like to.
Well, I used to live in Edinburgh, and I loved the Fringe when I lived in Edinburgh. I think we talked about this year how I lived in just at the edge of the New Town when I lived in Edinburgh, the Georgian New Town, and the person who lived above us didn't like the festival and used to put signs up. I think we talked about this year that would say residents against the Fringe, and we used to put signs up saying residents for the Fringe just to annoy him. But I totally, to be fair, I do get why some Edinburgh residents find this whole period quite tricky, because I was driving through the Cowgate earlier, going to work to do actual work, and it is sometimes you're like, get out of the way, move. This is not actually a film set. This is a working city. But that's a bit churlish, because it is, as Sarah says, it's a fantastic atmosphere, and there's an awful lot on offer. It is amazing.
So, Sarah, how long have you been back over from Washington now?
Since that Donald Trump trip, I haven't been back to the States. I've stayed here.
And what was it like, the Donald Trump, kind of circus arriving in your home country?
Very well timed, because it got me here in time to enjoy a week at the Fringe. But other than that, it was very bizarre, because following Donald Trump around, spending hours of my day listening to him talking about anything and everything in those long rambling press conferences and speeches that he gives, that's very, very familiar to me. But doing it in Scotland, surrounded by former colleagues and also other people watching who are not quite so accustomed to this circus, is the only way to describe it. Was slightly surreal. I've calculated, because how much time I spend listening to Donald Trump, because almost every day he'll randomly invite TV cameras into the Oval Office and just start talking, or he'll be off making a speech somewhere, and before you know it, he's done 45 minutes on a whole other topic. I think it's somewhere between 9 and 12 hours a week I spend literally just listening to Donald Trump, because you don't know what he's going to say, and he could produce a brand new newsline that's going to catapult me to the top of the 10 o'clock news running order, just with an off-the-cuff remark he makes sometimes at about 10 to 10, and before you know it, I'm on the television talking about it.
Oh, yeah. So, we've got used to the fact that sort of a foreign dignitary, like a prime minister or a president, comes to the Oval Office. What time is that happening in Washington?
So that usually comes around about noon our time. So that's pretty much just before the 6 o'clock news. The foreign dignitaries tend to turn up, if you talk about it in UK time, between about 4 and 5 in the afternoon. And I'm watching really carefully to see if we can overhear what Donald Trump and the visiting president or prime minister say as he greets them on the doorstep. Then we wait for the cameras to be allowed into the Oval Office. And as you know, that can just be bizarre. You can have the Zelensky-style practically punch-up that you had. You can have a kind of love-in with Benjamin Netanyahu. You can have Macron or Mark Carney or somebody trying to be terribly, terribly diplomatic. And they won't necessarily stop that before the TV 6 o'clock news and the radio 6 o'clock news is on air. So I'm sort of having to listen, grab little bites of that, put them on the TV. But is there going to be another bit that's better? And it's rather fraught, those visits.
And James, actually, for all journalists, this has changed the shape of the day for everyone, hasn't it? Because in the old days, the news was the agenda was set in the morning, and then it would sort of the big stories would be the big stories throughout the day. But actually, we've now all had to come to terms with the fact that, in the middle of the afternoon, Donald Trump speaks and the whole world changes.
Yeah, Sarah told me not long after President Trump had returned to power that they were keeping a space in the running order of the 10 o'clock news for her every night that was just empty because the would-be news just, this is the Sarah Smith slot in the news. Quite right,
It's
too.
not all
Quite
mine. It's
right
usually
too.
called Smith/Trump.
Well, Smith first. So, but I mean, that is the case, isn't it? But even going back to the first term, Adam, and I was based in the States, as you know, in 2015, 2016, through the campaign and the election. And even then, it was just incredible how he managed to take over the airwaves. And there's a lot of debate about the extent to which the media played into that and played his game and gave him free publicity and free airtime. And it's a big, long, heated topic even now of discussion about to what extent the media created the phenomenon that was Donald Trump. It's slightly insulting to a certain degree to the people who voted for him, who would say they liked him anyway. But there's definitely an argument about that. There was a famous quote from the head of CBS saying, well, he may be bad for the country. I mean, that's his view. It's not necessarily mine, but it may be bad for the country, but he's damn good for CBS. Yeah. Because every time they put Donald Trump on the television, they got viewers, you got advertising. There's definitely a commercial political nexus that drives a lot of this Trump engagement.
Not so good for CBS anymore.
No, not so
They
good
had
now.
to hand over $16 million just a couple of weeks ago to settle a case where he was complaining that the way they had edited an interview they did with Kamala Harris during the election campaign was too favorable to her. And this is a case they could easily have defended in court. It was a perfectly normal broadcasting practice to cut the interview down for length and clarity. But yeah, they caved in rather easily, it appeared, paid him $16 million. And then, of course, cancelled The Late Show with Stephen Colbert, probably the late night host who's the most critical of Trump, or the most piercingly critical of Trump, who does very well with clips that really get to the heart of what's going on. He's not going to be on the airwaves anymore, as CBS have cancelled him. And it's viewed very much in America as one of the ways that a lot of the big media corporations are giving in to him.
And then, of course, just after that happened, there was the now infamous episode of South Park, which was satirical of Donald Trump, to put it mildly. And we had a great moment in Newscast where Anthony Zerker, your podcasting partner from Americast, who is quite wonkish, and I say that as a mark of respect.
I think you would accept
yeah,
that.
Then it was explaining to me what South Park is. And I was like, Anthony, I know what South Park is. And also, I'm not sure this is the right way around this conversation. We're going to talk a bit more about Donald Trump, actually, because, I mean, there's loads of things we could say, not necessarily just about him, but about the impact he's had and the impact on British politics as well. You mentioned being here for the trip that was meant to be like his private holiday, but ended up being very, very public. We thought we'd just play you some little highlights of that tete-a-tete, as they called it in diplomatic language, between Donald Trump and Keir Starmer, which went on for a very, very long, long time.
I'm not a fan of your mayor, 10 or 12 days from today. That's real starvation stuff. I see it. It's the biggest deal, I think, in history, not just trade deal. And by the way, I never went to the island. Look out there. There's no windmills.
I mean, as you said, there's like 19 news stories just in that 19-second clip. Sarah, I mean, it is quite amazing, though, that Keir Starmer seems to get different treatment from a lot of other foreign leaders.
Yeah, it's absolutely remarkable. They met the first time, certainly this is how it's publicly described, no reason to disbelieve it, back in September during the election campaign last year when Keir Starmer was over in New York for the UN General Assembly Week. And it was arranged that he go to Trump Tower and have dinner with Donald Trump and a very small number of people. And apparently they personally hit it off. They really got on well together. Donald Trump goes out of his way every time Keir Starmer is mentioned to say how much he likes the guy, how he's a friend. He obviously has romantic attachment to Scotland because of his mother's family, and he made that very clear when he was here last week. But also to the United Kingdom. He seems to believe in the special relationship in a way that I would say more recent US presidents have not. Sort of romantically attached to the idea of Winston Churchill, whose bust he put back into the Oval Office, all of that kind of thing, which plays very well, very useful for the United Kingdom in its diplomatic relationship. But the more time they spend together, the better they get on. It's really difficult to imagine what small talk must be like between the two of them. They spent a lot of time in front of the cameras. But yeah, after that, they flew up to Aberdeenshire together, drove from the airfield to his Aberdeenshire golf course, sat beside each other at dinner. I mean, there's a lot of time. They must just be chit-chatting. I mean, do you think Keir Starmer, does he just listen? I mean, is that what Donald Trump likes?
Because the thing about Keir Starmer is like his only sort of like small talk chit-chat is about Arsenal. In my experience, and his kids, and it's like there's only so many things you can say about those two subjects.
I do think.
Well, I mean, I've got nothing to say on either.
I do think, though, that for all of that, the relationship and the close, and it does seem, as you say, Sarah, to be a genuine relationship. And people can have their views. Newscasters will have their views about whether that's a good thing or a bad thing from Keir Starmer's point of view, and whether he's too close or not close enough. But I do think that what we also witnessed was the brutal reality of the asymmetric power dynamic when he was in Scotland. Because whenever an American president travels anywhere, it's very difficult for the country he is in not to be in awe of this enormous superpower, the most powerful nation ever to have existed in the world, and the extraordinary circus that comes with him. And it's quite overwhelming when you see it. Even I've covered it. I've been in the White House traveling press. You've covered it way more than me. And even then, you still think, this is a lot of stuff. There's like a lot of equipment, a lot of apparatus, a lot of people, and people who walk into your country and start screaming at you like they're in charge, because they kind of are in charge. And I think in terms of Sir Keir Starmer, going to golf courses, following Trump around here and there, getting on planes with him, traveling around with him, eating dinner with him, being hosted by him. Who is the host here? Whose country is this? This is the United Kingdom. Sir Keir Starmer is Prime Minister of this country, and critics might well say, and have said over the last week or two, that that is not necessarily a great look for the Labour Prime Minister, to look like he is a guest in his own nation. The flip side of that, I'm sure Downing Street would put this point across, is it's realpolitik. You've got to deal with this guy. You've got to flatter this guy. You've got to get close to this guy. I mean, you can cut it both ways.
It's not just, though, that Donald Trump was standing on the doorstep greeting Keir Starmer and his wife, and then treating him to dinner in his other golf course. He was using as a backdrop his commercially owned properties. He was using the Prime Minister, essentially, to advertise his Turnberry course and the new course that he was opening in Aberdeenshire. Sir Keir had left by the time he had an opening ceremony the following morning, but he had the First Minister of Scotland, John Sweeney, stand up and take a bow at the opening ceremony, because, these are senior politicians being used as props, basically, to advertise commercial Trump properties.
And it was, I was now going to do a bit of advertising for Donald Trump. I remember going for lunch at the golf course in Aberdeen, not hosted by Donald Trump or anything. I just happened to be passing. We thought, wouldn't it be quite cool to pop in and like have lunch at Donald Trump's place? And it is once you go into the clubhouse, it's a weird, it's a Hollywood version of Scotland in there, isn't it? And then you can get Trump lager, which was actually quite nice. And then you're like, oh, this is actually quite nice. And I had a pulled pork burger, and it was delicious. And it was incredibly expensive. Now, James, talking about things that are a good look or not, how did you get electrocuted in your pursuit of the news that day?
Well, I was not killed.
Well, thank you, that's good.
To be clear, but I was electrified. Did we talk about this? I can't remember if we talked about this.
You told me, but I don't know if you
we talked about this on Newscast the other week. Anyway, so
I mean, if I'd had a near-death experience, I'd be telling everyone every day.
So the ludicrous thing about our insane trade that we're involved in is 90% of it is just hanging around waiting for things to happen.
Usually standing in a car park in the rain.
In car parks, in the rain, in fields. Like, it's not glamorous. I mean, I know you know this, newscasters. It's not a glamorous job, journalism. But it's particularly unglamorous when you know inside Turnberry, it's the glitziest, most glamorous, all this. Well, apparently the plywood's great, according to Donald Trump, really good plywood. But we're outside waiting and waiting and waiting, and all we need is shots of Donald Trump playing golf on the golf course. I mean, why? We need them. I say we need them. Why do we need them? Apparently we need them. So we're waiting and waiting. But to get the shots of Donald Trump golfing, you have to clamber across a gate and into a field, and across a field which has some like really big holes in it, and our poor cameraman Aidan fell over, and he's very tough, and he just soldiered on for the next 2 days, and I think he'd sprained his ankle, but he was fine. Then you have to clamber under an electric fence, and I'm from the country, I'm from Forfar, so I'm like, I can do electric fences. You just flick your hand on the back of them to see if they're on or not. So I flicked my hand on the back of it, and it was off, and I thought, that's great. So I clambered under this electric fence, over another fence, into the next field. There's the next electric fence. Never assume. So I scramble. Oh, it's off, isn't it? Obviously. So I scramble under that one, and halfway under it, I realise it is very much not off. It's on my back, and it was quite painful. It was all right. And then, even better, this is really unfair to poor Aidan, who's like not here to defend himself and is actually a brilliant and smart guy. But Aidan goes, "Is that on?" Oops.
Well, I'm
So
glad
we
you survived.
both
Glad
got
you
a shot.
survived. And get well soon, Aidan.
And we got the
I'm
shots.
sorry your colleagues don't seem to care about your busted ankle.
He got some great shots, Aidan did.
Right, we've got some questions. Claire said, oh, actually, this is quite a broad question, but maybe it is related to all of this. What's your scariest live TV moment, Sarah?
Ooh, insects, usually. Large ones. There was a wasp bothering me as we were recording Scottcast the other day, but that was our podcast. It's less dangerous. But especially if you're talking about something really quite serious and there's no room for jokes. If you've got, something buzzing around here, a fly threatening to fly into your mouth, if it's one of those years in Washington where the cicadas are out, it's not unknown for them to get up your skirt, say.
Oh.
Insects can be extremely hazardous for live broadcasting.
I've got an insect story, which is when I was doing my Brussels stint, and basically the picture behind you is a big TV with a live picture of Brussels behind it. So it looks like you're outside, but you're
What,
actually...
it's not real?
You're actually... No, it is real. It's in real time.
It's a live feed.
It's not made up pictures. It's not AI generated or like a watercolor. But it means the scale's a bit off. So one day a bug landed on the lens, and it looked like I was being attacked by like a 7-foot wide bug. And then I was doing a careers talk at my friend's son's primary school, and we played them some clips, and it was like all stuff like we've just seen there, but the one that they loved the best was the attack of the giant bug on Daily Politics. So there we go, inspiring the next generation.
There's a great YouTube clip of me outside the Scottish Parliament from a few years ago.
Yes.
And what's fairly common if you're doing live broadcasting, especially at night, is that there will be people hanging around watching you, maybe just deliberately trying to distract you, having a bit of fun, and you wouldn't necessarily know about that unless my eye line's going very, very peculiarly. So I was trying to ignore, as I was talking about some deeply serious vote in Holyrood, some kids going round and round and round me on their bikes. And the point at which it was almost impossible to ignore was when one of them did finally cycle into the shot and then immediately fall into one of those ponds outside Holyrood, very noticeably over my shoulder. And I think that's had more YouTube views than anything else I've done in a 30-year career.
Please do not attempt to recreate the situation Sarah has just described. James, have you had any scary... you've already had your electrocution, so...
Well, yeah, I mean, that was bad enough. No, I remember one in particular in Perth at the referendum on Scottish independence, when it wasn't scary as such, it was just really difficult because I was doing this... It was onto the BBC News channel, and it was a very complicated sequence of 7 headlines, because for some insane reason, I was co-presenting a programme, and we decided to do a headline for every day of the week, but I couldn't hear the comms, I couldn't hear the control room in London, it was going to be a shambles. And as soon as I started, there were pro-independence people here and pro-union people here, and as soon as I started to speak, everyone started to cheer and jump up and down. I couldn't hear a word that was going on. And so when we got into the first recorded piece, which was like 12 seconds long or something, I said to them, I'm really sorry, but like, would you mind terribly just to, keep it down? And because it was Perth, they all said, yeah, no problem.
Oh, lovely Perth.
Perth's quite a genteel city for newscasters who are not aware of Perth.
Right, we'll get some more insights into Sarah and James's life a bit later on, but let's go back to some news, although some of that was news to me. I can't believe we've done this. So basically, we've taken some of Donald Trump's latest comments and posts on Truth Social, and we got Matt Ford, the comedian, who does an amazing Donald Trump impression, to voice them up. So much so that when Chris, the editor of Newscast, sent it to me, I was like, have we got Donald Trump to do a voice note for Newscast because it's so convincing. So here is the first clip from Matt Ford, and this is Donald Trump's post on Truth Social from the end of last week where he talked about repositioning those US nuclear submarines in response to some posts on social media from one of Vladimir Putin's allies. So please take it away in pre-recorded voice note form, Matt Ford, aka Donald Trump.
Based on the highly provocative statements of the former president of Russia, Dmitry Medvedev, who is now the deputy chairman of the Security Council of the Russian Federation, I have ordered 2 nuclear submarines to be positioned in the appropriate regions, just in case these foolish and inflammatory statements are more than just that. Words are very important and can often lead to unintended consequences. I hope this will not be one of those instances. Thank you for your attention in this matter.
And thank you, Matt. I mean, it's very convincing, isn't it?
Yes.
Let's hope he doesn't get the nuclear codes. Sarah, I mean, there's loads of things to say about. I mean, another one of those Trump stories where, at first glance, it seems really quite significant and maybe quite scary and a real upping of the ante. But then you're like, well, actually, is it really that significant? It sounds quite blustery as opposed to actually a big kind of military diplomatic maneuver that changes the world.
It does. And this is a perfect example of how careful we have to be when it comes to reporting Donald Trump. Now, I was here enjoying Edinburgh the day he posted that, so I wasn't responsible for putting it on air, but I know what discussions my colleagues will have been having. So first of all, you have to look at the content of it. It says nuclear submarines. In London, the phones are going to be automatically ringing. News editors from London saying, right, we need to put this on the news. Well, just take a breath. Nuclear submarines. Nuclear-powered submarines or nuclear-armed submarines?
Which are 2 different things.
Exactly. Moving closer to the region or the appropriate region, well, they can hit Moscow from pretty much everywhere, can't they? And how much closer to the region, to the point where we're actually, talking about butting up against Russia's maritime borders, or just a couple of miles closer? No, I think that, which was very, very headline grabbing, didn't actually tell us anything at all, except that he'd seen what Medvedev had said and didn't really like it, frankly. And I think it's a perfect example of something not to get too excited about, because there's so much going on with this administration in foreign policy as well as domestically that urgently does need to have a lot of attention paid to it. We need to be careful that we don't use up too much of our airtime or just too much of our own mental and emotional bandwidth on the flam like that he puts out and not concentrating on the serious stuff.
And your analysis is borne out completely by what the Kremlin said in response, which was basically, in the last couple of days, we're not really that worried about this. The Kremlin went out of their way to play it down, and also to say Dmitry Medvedev does not speak for Russia in these matters. Vladimir Putin does. So I think that was, that basically makes your point for you.
And also, we can't even really take it as another data point in where's the Putin-Trump relationship going, because actually it was aimed very much at a Putin proxy, somebody who's seen as a bit of a hothead on social media. So it doesn't even really tell us that much about that changing dynamic, does it?
I think one of the things that helps me understand Donald Trump a bit and try and anticipate what he might do or what he's thinking is to understand that he's a real creature of the 80s. So it's a mindset that you and James are probably too young to remember to the same extent. But everything from his playlist, and his taste in interior decor to his politics are very much rooted not just in the 20th century, but kind of in the 70s and the 80s. And I think he will have a visceral terror of nuclear war, because everybody who's as older than me will remember what it was like in the 70s and 80s, the warnings that we had at school, the procedures that we were taught about what to do if you heard the 3-minute warning, the real fear that there was actually about a nuclear war. I think that will be quite deeply embedded in him, and I think he might bluster all he wants, but I think actually the idea of him risking nuclear war would be pretty unthinkable.
Well, that's good.
And I should say, we are recording these episodes of Newscast at the National Museum of Scotland, which has this amazing auditorium and stage. And one of the temporary exhibitions they've got on at the moment is called Scotland in the Cold War. And that's going to be my little pre-newscast treat tomorrow on Wednesday when I have a couple of hours off to do that. Right, another news story. And actually, this is one I'm going to be working on later this week because my other show, Antisocial, on BBC Radio 4, it's like I'm flyering at the Fringe, isn't it? Come to my show, midday, Radio 4 Friday. It's about this advert that Sydney Sweeney, the actor, did for American Eagle, where she's wriggling around in that pair of jeans and it then says, Sydney Sweeney's got great jeans. And that's caused quite a lot of uproar for people who think that's an offensive thing to say, or it's kind of a bit racist, or it's a bit kind of getting into eugenics. Anyway, of course, Donald Trump then commented on that, and he did one of those classic sort of drive-bys where he's about to get on a plane or a helicopter, and people are just shouting random questions at him. He's like, what? And then he picks up whatever thread he fancies, and in this case, he picked up Sydney Sweeney.
Who was?
Sydney Sweeney. She's like a very hot actress right now.
She's a registered Republican?
Yes.
Oh, now I love her ad. Is that right? Is Sydney Sweeney? You'd be surprised at how many people are Republicans. That's what I wouldn't have known, but I'm glad you told me that. If Sydney Sweeney is a registered Republican, I think her ad is fantastic. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And just to be clear, he was saying, I think her ad is fantastic. Because when I first heard it, I was like, wow, he's gone even further than normal. Actually, Sarah, before we discuss this, can you just explain that concept of being a registered Republican, actually? Because that's quite unusual to British ears, that whole thing.
Yeah, so when you register to vote within your state, just as you do here with your address and details, you can tick a box to say that you are a Republican, a Democrat, or an independent. The rules vary very slightly from state to state, but that's it in most cases. And it doesn't require you to vote that way. You can be a Republican who registered as such in 1980 and hasn't voted Republican since, but just never got around to changing your registration. What it does mean is you can vote in the primaries, so for the presidential elections, but also when you're choosing who the candidate's going to be for a representative or a senator or something. If you're a registered Republican, you can go and vote to pick between Nikki Haley and Donald Trump to be the presidential candidate. You probably can't vote, depending on what state you're in, for the Democrats. So that's the incentive to not just say independent all the time. To choose means you can then get involved in the democratic process on your side of the aisle. And it tells you a bit about some states. You could say that, Texas has far more registered Republicans than it does Democrats. Doesn't mean they'll always vote that way, but I think it's more an indicator of your political background probably than of views right now.
And then this was obviously playing on Donald Trump's mind because he then wrote quite a lengthy post on Truth Social about the Sydney Sweeney phenomenon, drawing in all sorts of other celebrities who'd got involved in politics tangentially. And so please welcome back Matt Ford with another voice note.
Sydney Sweeney, a registered Republican, has the hottest ad out there. It's for American Eagle, and the jeans are flying off the shelves. Go get him, Sydney. On the other side of the ledger, Jaguar did a stupid and seriously woke advertisement that is a total disaster. The CEO just resigned in disgrace, and the company is in absolute turmoil. Who wants to buy a Jaguar after looking at that disgraceful ad? Shouldn't they have learned a lesson from Bud Light, which went woke and essentially destroyed in a short campaign? The company. The market cap destruction has been unprecedented, with billions of dollars so foolishly lost. Just look at woke singer Taylor Swift. Ever since I alerted the world to what she was by saying on Truth that I can't stand her, hate, she was booed out of the Super Bowl and became no longer hot. The tide has been seriously turned. Being woke is for losers. Being Republican is what you want to be. Thank you for your attention in this matter.
I think the record would show Taylor Swift is still pretty hot when it comes to showbiz success. So that's a little bit of fact-checking there for Donald Trump. And thank you very much to Matt for those amazing voice notes. He is in Edinburgh for the next few weeks. He's doing a show called Defying Calamity. And if you're in Edinburgh, you cannot escape his posters because he's done a Mickey take of the Wicked posters where he's both characters, pink and green. And he's also recording his podcast, The Political Party, here as well, with lots of good guests. So hopefully some of you will get to experience some of that. James, what's interesting there about the whole Sydney Sweeney thing, and I'm not going to get you to wade into the potential eugenics or not of that advert, is that Trump is good at tapping into the zeitgeist and talking about things that, everyone is talking about, and actually a previous generation of politicians just wouldn't have gone there.
He is very good at that. And also, his opponents, I think, very often fall into his trap. And this is, I think, a case in point of his opponents falling into a trap. most people, I think, probably just see an advert of an attractive actress wearing jeans and don't really read all that much more into it than that. You know, she has great jeans. She says in one of the adverts, "You see what I did there? Yes, Sydney. We see what you did there. We get the pun." But then for that to become an argument about eugenics, I just think that some people, not all by all means of Donald Trump's opponents, have jumped onto that bandwagon. Quite a lot of people have said that's mad. You know, that's a silly road to go down. If, you know, for a white, blonde, blue-haired actress to say she's got good genes, to immediately jump all the way from there to the Nazis and eugenics and fascism seems a long leap, and not necessarily, almost certainly not a leap that's going to win you very many, if any, votes. So, but again, Donald Trump jumps into this, is doing quite well out of jumping into it, and his opponents, again, are on the back foot. And I don't know what you think, Sarah, he just seems repeatedly on these issues, he seems to have an instinct, which is your point, Adam, for when to jump in and how, that seems to be good for him and bad for his opponents.
Absolutely, because all the time that his opponents are talking about these kind of issues, whether it's about transgender issues or anything that the Republicans can paint as crazily extreme woke stuff, is when Democrats are losing. Now, there are people who believe that, but they're already, you know, committed to the left. They're progressives who are speaking to each other, who do in America tend to perform quite a lot on social media for each other about who can be more woke and more politically correct. And that's a very, very small section of politically active people who don't represent swing voters, for instance, in the American heartland. And by bringing this up, Donald Trump is making sure that he highlights the fact that his opponents are not talking about healthcare, they're not talking about immigration, they're talking about whether or not an advert with Sydney Sweeney in it is racist or not. And that's exactly the kind of thing where people think this is what Democrats obsess about and waste their time over, rather than looking at the things that matter to me and my family around our kitchen table here.
And what I found doing Antisocial, Radio 4, midday on Friday, is that these conversations in America are much more extreme than they are here. We get versions of them, but they're the kind of like the diet version of the culture wars that you get in America around these issues.
I think that's true, but also, in fairness, I suppose, that's not to say there's not structural inequality in the United States of America. That's not to say that there is not deep and entrenched racial equality in the United States of America. That's just not necessarily, I mean, you know, these things obviously and clearly exist, but the question is, what do you use to make those arguments, and do you pick the right vehicle with which to advance that case, if you were on the left, that you would be advancing, that you want to try to dismantle those structural inequalities. And, you know, I think the record will probably show in this case that this has not been successful. As Sarah says, it might be successful with some people with a certain political leaning, but if you're trying to win back the heartland of the country, is this the issue to choose? And I strongly suspect it won't be.
Right, let's have another clip now. And this isn't Matt Ford, but it is Kamala Harris making a bit of a comeback because she's got a book out called 107 Days, which is about her unsuccessful presidential campaign, which lasted precisely that long. And she was actually on the chat show of someone we were talking about a second ago, Stephen Colbert, just before it gets cancelled. So let's have a listen to what Kamala Harris was saying.
For now, I don't want to go back in the system. I think it's broken. I think there's so many good people who are public servants, who do such good work, teachers and firefighters and police officers and nurses and scientists.
She's doing that Kamala Harris thing I love, where she does a list of things and then randomly emphasizes one of them. Breakfast, coffee, lunch, afternoon tea, dinner. I love them all. Sorry, that wasn't very good. Sorry, bring back Matt Ford. Bring back Matt Ford. No, but what was interesting about that clip, though, is actually the question he asked her that provoked that answer. Because he said, are you going to run for the governorship of California? Because Gavin Newsom, who's in that job at the moment, cannot run again. And so there's going to be a vacancy in a couple of years' time. And so she has to have quite a compelling reason for her own supporters why she doesn't go for that job, hasn't she? And also she has to not look like a scaredy cat for not going for it, because she might have her eye on another job.
Yeah, I wouldn't be too worried about those millions of Kamala Harris supporters all around the country who are eagerly egging her on to run for elected office again. I mean, I thought that was a very good example of why she shouldn't be running and taking up the Democratic mantle. What is she talking about? I don't know. And if the system is broken, who broke it? And if it is that badly damaged, who on earth is going to repair it if it's not senior Democrats taking on the system? Now, I don't think she's the great one to do it. I mean, she lost very comprehensively, largely because she couldn't articulate a message very clearly to voters, just as she wasn't doing there. I think she'd be a hopeless choice to represent the Democrats again, whether in California or nationwide. But yeah, I think a lot about that clip showed us we don't need to read the 107 Days book to know why she's not in the White House right now.
I thought that what was interesting as well about that clip was the applause for the word scientists. And she doesn't set out her case there, but the Trump administration has, in its attempts, not least alongside Elon Musk, to curtail the power of the state and to shrink the power of the state, whether or not it's shrink the size and curtail the power of the state, has, among other things, made life very difficult for people working in science in the administration, whether that's in meteorology or whether that's in research for diseases. And I was speaking to an old friend of mine not that long ago who works not in the United States, but works in tropical medicine, very senior scientist in tropical medicine with very good contacts. And this person was telling me that they are now in the position where they can have no contact whatsoever with the people they've been dealing with in the US administration for years, not even in the administration itself, but associated with the administration, anyone working in public science in the United States, because those people are so fearful because they've been told you must have no interaction with international aid whatsoever. But that has extended so far, the chilling effect of that they can't even have a private, or they feel they're too frightened to have a private messaging conversation with an international, a scientist abroad about general topics because they're fearful of losing their job. So I thought when I heard science there, it just reminded me of, that's not entirely on topic with Kamala Harris, but I thought it's quite an interesting story about the ripples spreading out from the Trump administration and some of the decisions that he took in the early days of his second term that we have talked about. But I mean, as Sarah says, just such a tsunami of news every day that it moves on and it moves on. But these things are still having very profound effects.
It's not just science as well, of course. I mean, it's basically a war on truth, which we saw quite a lot of in the last 7 days. Firstly, he, as I'm sure you all know, fired the top statistician because she came out with jobs numbers that he didn't like, as though that was her fault, and as though he's going to change the numbers of jobs that have or haven't been created in the United States by firing the statistician. And this is at the same time as, on a much smaller basis, things like in the national parks and the Smithsonian museums, details about America's history are being excised. It no longer says an exhibit in one of the Smithsonian museums in Washington that Donald Trump is one of the presidents who has been served articles of impeachment. It just has Bill Clinton. No, Nixon never was it? And whoever the historical ones are, whose names I can't remember. That's been Donald Trump's name's been taken out of that, as racial history is being rewritten in the museums. It's not just scientific research. It's fact and truth that is being attacked.
But I mean, what we're talking about there is extraordinary.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the sort of thing that I'm not calling the United States under Donald Trump a totalitarian regime, but it's the kind of thing that totalitarian regimes are accused of doing.
Yeah.
And we're talking about supposedly the world's most powerful democracy, leading democracy. I mean, it's unbelievable.
I mean, we've had a pair of related questions from both Angela and Paul asking the same thing, really, about how the Democrats actually are getting on. Like, okay, you give us a 1-star review of Kamala Harris there. What about the others?
Yeah, it's been tricky because they're in this position where they don't have a figurehead because obviously Kamala Harris, not a very successful and a defeated candidate. Joe Biden, of course, I mean, I was going to say disgraced. Is that fair? I mean, I think in the way he's perceived by a lot of American voters, yes, ever since so much information has come out. since he stood down as president about his cognitive and physical abilities in the White House and the extent to which people around him were covering that up. That's a real scandal, regardless of what your politics are. I think that is a real scandal that's consuming people as well. That means people who were very close to him, it's difficult for them to put their heads above the parapet because they have some big questions to answer about what you knew and when about the state of Joe Biden going into the 2024 presidential election. And then you have other people who will go for the nomination when it comes up, from J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois. You've got Senator Alyssa Slotkin in Minnesota, Missouri. A bunch of people. Gavin Newsom, the governor of California, very kind of glamorous, media-savvy guy who'll almost certainly go for the nomination. Pete Buttigieg. These people are around, but they don't really have a national platform. They don't have somewhere to appear. And in Congress, the leader of the Democrats in the House and in the Senate, where they don't have a majority at all, and they can very, very rarely win a vote, they appear on the news issue by issue, but yeah, they don't have a significant following. So there's a lack of face and name recognition, really, to put behind the fight back.
We've had an excellent question from Pamela. Thank you for this,
really
Pamela.
surprised.
No, I don't. Oh yeah, Pamela. She's famous for her rubbish questions. No, I mean it's an excellent question. Comma. It's from Pamela. So thank you, Pamela. May I ask Sarah and James? I mean, I'm not doing a very good job of reading it out, but if being Scottish has ever benefited them while being in the United States? It's a good question, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, so as I think of ways in which it might have done, I mean, it certainly means if you meet Scottish people, or people who have a Scottish background, you have a little bit more of a connection with them. I've got colleagues who are either Irish or have Irish names and Irish backgrounds. I think they do a bit better out of it because there's a lot more Americans consider themselves to be Irish than to be Scottish. So if you're, whether you're standing in a queue to get into a Trump rally, trying to make polite conversation with people around you, or trying to persuade some poor family that what they really want to do is spend their dinner time with a BBC television camera at their dining table talking about politics to me instead of just having a pleasant evening among themselves. If they know, a long-lost relative from some part of Scotland that I can describe to them, you're more likely to get in there. But there is a flip side as well, because I'm sure you all know, not everybody in America completely understands the difference between Scotland, England, the United Kingdom, Great Britain. Just for the sake of brevity and time, James, in all of the times that you were asked in America, are you English? Did you say yes?
No.
Liar.
I didn't know, but it did happen. It does happen a lot. I also Irish quite a lot. Are you Irish? I mean, it does happen a lot. You spend a lot of time explaining Great Britain is made up of Scotland, yeah, blah, 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 blah. And the United Kingdom is yada, yada, yada. But no, I didn't. Did you? Have you said you're English? Is that what you're saying? You're in Edinburgh.
I've nodded my head in acquiescence sometimes just for time. And if you've got something else complicated you want to talk about, explaining the constitutional relationship between Scotland and the United Kingdom isn't necessarily the best use of that time.
Fair. And I have said the words as a foreign correspondent, the BBC of London. I have said that. Well, especially in a non-English speaking context in Mexico or whatever, I've said BBC from London, BBC de Londres, because it's just quick, it's shorthand, London calling, and all that. But I think it is, generally speaking, I can't speak for the English. Do we have any English in?
Yes.
It's like we're doing panto, so that's in 5 months' time, James.
I can't speak for the English, obviously, but I find being Scottish is generally quite well received. But when you mentioned Ireland, I thought that's interesting. The Irish have leveraged their brand and their diaspora better than the Scots, haven't they? Why is that? Just that they have better pubs, or what is it?
I wish I'd asked Brian Cox that. We would have got a 2-hour-long answer with loads of swear words in it that we had to edit out.
Couldn't have put any of it on the podcast.
I have no idea what the answer to that question is. Other than when you go to America, I mean, my favorite Ireland story about America is when I was on holiday in San Francisco and there was an Irish souvenir shop called Treasure Ireland. Is that the brand going well for Ireland? I don't know.
Oh, I'll tell you one benefit, actually, not that long ago, was because I was a Scot in Washington, D.C., I was invited to a St Andrew's Society annual dinner, where they obviously wanted enough Scottish people there, so I could sit beside Brian Cox as he was given a Lifetime Achievement Award. So that was, that was a top benefit of being Scottish.
Did he look like he was enjoying himself?
Ish.
We've had a related question from Cameron. Have you heard your own Dead Ringers impressions? I've recently made my Dead Ringers debut in the last few episodes.
Congratulations.
Thank you very much. I would say it's an honor just to be there. And Dead Ringers actually do have a show at the Fringe as well, so you can go and see them. But yeah, their impression of me needs a little bit more work, I would say. So I've become very grand after just being on there twice. They do a very good...
We haven't been, I don't think.
No.
But certainly I haven't heard it. But often Scottish accents, this is a problem, I think it's not just with Dead Ringers, with a lot of impersonators. They just think if you make it Scottish, then it'll sound right. So they would have me sounding the same as Laura Koonsberg and Kirsty Wark. And I don't think anybody ever got Gordon Brown or Alistair Darling very well in those impersonation shows, because they just stuck a sort of Glasgow accent.
Although Lewis MacLeod is Scottish, of Dead Ringers, so he should be able to do some of the Scottish accent.
And he's got his own show in addition to doing Dead Ringers on the Fringe. I think what's interesting about Dead Ringers, now having been on it, is what they actually do is they try to capture the person's character as much as they try to do an actual impersonation, which is why it was really insulting that they described me as the young, enthusiastic puppy you fantasize about locking in the car on a hot day.
Oh.
To which I say, meow. Right, okay, we're running out of time because there's another show on here in about 3 minutes. So I'm going to say thank you very much to James and Sarah. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam.
Thank you to Dead Ringers, who are probably now never going to do me ever again, so be careful what you wish for. Thank you very much to you listening at home or wherever you are listening to this episode of Newscast. And also thank you to the newscasters who came and joined us today. You were great. Thank you. Didn't have time to answer the question about what shows I've seen at the Fringe. One of them today included At Lunchtime, a drag artist, quite well known, who ended the show completely naked on a stool with a firework up their bum. 5 stars. Right, there'll be another episode of Newscast from the Edinburgh Fringe along very soon. Bye.